Is there any last-minute clawback by Labor now evident which could save the party from humiliation?
I think it's hard to imagine a single thing Labor could do to improve the result. Christina Keneally has campaigned bravely and energetically, but Labor's depressed primary vote has been in place more or less for the last 2 or 3 years.
So you give her points for bravery, but she hasn't moved. If it was centred around the leader and her marketability, she hasn't moved the vote at all.
It's a full day too early to tell exactly how the electorate will respond. So it's impossible to say precisely where Labor's primary vote will land. But I think Christina has campaigned bravely and energetically, and for most of this campaign set the pace of the campaign. But I think, in fairness to her, she started the year with one arm tied behind her back with the privatisation sale being so badly managed.
We'll get to recriminations later if we've got time. John Hewson, are you making a prediction?
Look, I think the polls today say somewhere between 14 and 20 seats will remain in the hands of the Labor Party. I think that's probably right. I tend to be a bit towards the bottom end of that range, but look, it's very hard to tell because in campaigns, as you know, it depends on the strength of the individual campaigns in the individual seats, and some candidates do well and against the trend and some do poorly against a bad trend.
But if what we're witnessing now is this pendulum and nothing stops the pendulum, and all will be swept before.
I think so. I think that, my own view of this over the years has been that when the primary vote falls much below 30%, it's no longer so much about personalities, it's more about service delivery. And I think the general view is that there's been a failure of service delivery across the board in almost every area of government.
Graham Weatherburn will go on for half an hour if we let him on that because he was with Bob Curran, he's defending the legacy. But do you acknowledge, well, let's go to recriminations. Why?
I think that's best left for a full audit by the party and others after the result tomorrow. We are a full day too early to start examining the entrails of the election campaign and what led up to the result. But I will say this. I think that the Carr government was a very good government that managed the state very well for 10 years. And it wasn't perfect, no government is. But the election results of 1999 and 2003, which were record high results for Labor since 1995, were the electorate's judgment, the community's judgment on the performance of a Labor government. And as a record high primary votes for this period of government under Carr. And
maintained by Yemma in 2007. I mean,
bequeathed election margins in seats bequeathed by Carr's high watermark in 03 to Yemma.
All right, you're going on to defend, you're not making any admissions. I'm going to have to go to John Hewson. Let's talk about a change of government for New South Wales. Mr Hewson, you've written somewhat despairingly that nothing much will change. Do you agree with former Liberal leader Peter Debnam that Barry O'Farrell has missed an opportunity, a unique opportunity to get a mandate for more visionary reform?
Well, going back to what I said about the collapse of the primary vote, I think his mandate is across the board. I mean, the view in the electorate, I'm sure, is fix it. And it doesn't matter whether it's transport or health or schools or whatever. They want it fixed. They expect it to be fixed. And I think...
I'm sorry to interrupt you. If he's going to fix it, that means a pain in other areas. If it's a rearrangement of
Absolutely. Look, it's not going to be easy to fix it. Otherwise, I think it might have been fixed. Even with bad issues management, there's a lot that could have been done. But I think that Barry doesn't have the luxury of time. He is going to have to move quickly and decisively, measured if you like, but quickly and decisively across the board, but certainly so the people will, in 3 to 4 years' time, will feel that, well, actually he's done what he said he'd do. He'd actually fix it. He'd actually make New South Wales #1 or whatever the slogan was. He's really going to have to deliver. Otherwise, I think the electorate will leave him.
Well, we'll see what happens. But Mr Wedderburn, let's move on to the consequences in a broader term. Is this the end of the Workers' Party? You're in minority government federally. You've lost Victoria to Ted Baillieu and the Liberals. The anti-Labor forces are massing behind Campbell Newman, the Brisbane Lord Mayor. You're on the ropes with an infarct, aren't you? Brand Labor is finished.
No, I think decidedly not. The result in 1988, which is the most recent and comparable likely result for Labor in New South Wales, was deep, and people thought Labor would be out of office for a generation. But Labor under Carr, in 7 years, took out 2 Liberal premiers, the preeminent Liberal of his time, Nick Greiner, and ended John Fay's political career at state level. So it can be done. it can be done over 2 terms.
What about broadening?
broadening?
There's been no reform of the Australian Labor Party for any post-election inquiry. There's been nothing. You're still a trade union-based party, and that membership's been sinking.
Proudly a trade union-based party, but the party has always been more successful when in government. It's been broadly appealing. And I think also when it's
so you're going to sit there waiting for the next pendulum to come back with a bit of issues management again, are you?
No, not at all. When John says, "Oh, it's all bad," we hear a lot about what's bad about New South Wales, but I don't think the evidence is necessarily there. And I'd say this on transport today, on-time running of trains, we would have been 95%. Today, students in New South Wales schools have the highest levels of literacy and numeracy of all of the Australian states.
And we've got the AAA credit rating as well. Okay, we've acknowledged that.
Campaign at 6 o'clock tomorrow night.
They will.
We will. But I think we've heard a great deal to talk down New South Wales, but it hasn't really been a fact-based campaign. We've seen a bit of vibe about "we'll fix it" from Barry O'Farrell. But he already has.
We've got no contrition from you on the night before your party is about to be done over.
No, that's not true at all. But this black armband view about New South Wales Labor Party.
Where's the contrition from you? Where's the apology? Christina Keneally apologised at the outset.
I'm not a party spokesperson, but I'm happy to say, having been a long-serving member of a Labor government, that we did a lot of very good things in New South Wales, and we do deeply regret mistakes we've made. But it can't all the good can't be thrown out with the bad. But as I said, this result is clear because the primary vote has been depressed for at least 2 years.
I think the electorate's over Labor. That's the bottom line. I mean, they want it.
It's time.
It's time, and I guess the bulk of people who are voting tomorrow are going to vote against the Labor Party, not for Barry O'Farrell.
Traditional
polls
Labor
are saying that,
party.
But having said that, I do think that the general perception in the electorate is that the failure of policy is across the board. There may be some areas where you've made some progress and some areas where you've done some good things, but the bottom line is they're over it. They've had enough. Let's move on. The other crowd can't do any worse. But I do think that given the fickleness of electorates these days, that Barry hasn't got that long. He can't assume that he's going to, as Richo says, I think he's going to have 3 terms. I think he should assume he's got 1 term, and if he doesn't put the runs on the board in that term, he'll have a contest next time around.
It sounds as though you don't think the Labor Party's in any dire trouble.
No, on the contrary, I think both parties are in dire trouble. I think the party base of both sides has dwindled. I think the focus has certainly shifted. I mean, so many apparatchiks have gone into politics these days rather than people from established careers who may have a significant contribution to make. I think the whole standing of politicians has been debased to the point where we saw it federally this week in the Parliament, probably the low point of the federal Parliament, despite all the protestations about a new paradigm. I mean, things have got a lot worse.
Persuade our fellow Australians to join political parties.
Yes, well, they
don't want it. They're too busy trying to make it.
That's where you need to face the reality of that, the reality of the social media and the significance of how you use that going forward. I mean, the traditional concept of a party, as it was run by Sussex Street, for example, does not exist anymore, in my view, and won't come back easily. But, there is a pendulum in terms of the standing of governments, but in terms of the organisational structures of both parties, I think they are anachronistic. They need to be reformed.
Political parties, the strength of them depends, I think, a great deal on the strength and quality of the parliamentary representation that they see.
What about the rank and file?
I'm saying that the rank and file are happiest when they see in their political leaders people of skill and good judgment and professionalism. And that's not always apparent in politics across the board. But I think that, as we saw in 88, if the result is bleak for Labor tomorrow, as all polls and all of the pundits predict, Labor has shown that it will regenerate. It can rebuild, and it can rebuild from a disastrous result like 88 in less than 2 terms.
What was your prediction for tomorrow?
I find it very hard to make a prediction a day out from it without being apparently disloyal. But I think that the result is clear. It's not due to Rees or Keneally. It's been there for a long time, for 2 years, a long burn. And I think that Labor could see its number of seats halved to about 20 plus in the lower house.
20 plus, and I think yours was
14 to 20, as the polls say, and towards the bottom end of that range.
John Hewson, Graham Wedderburn, thanks very much.
Thanks very much.
Australian cricket captain Ricky